as cloud governance, a fundamental requirement for cloud adoption to scale. As part of the presentation, there will be a live demo of Jamcracker's cloud governance solution, putting theory into practice. This webcast is part of our monthly series. Today we have Steve Crawford, Vice President of Jamcracker, and Bob Bellevue as your presenters. So let's get started, gentlemen.
Great, thank you, Tony, and good morning and good evening and afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Steve Crawford. First, a quick introduction on Jamcracker, more to give you a sense of the perspective that we're coming from as we delve into this topic of cloud governance. Jamcracker was founded back in 1999. Since then, we've been providing a platform that allows IT organizations, service providers of different types to have a single platform where they can manage and deliver cloud services of different types. For an IT organization, that would be for their internal employees, but for a service provider, that might be for the customers, for a distributor, that might be for their value-added resellers. And so this is something that we, 100% of our focus is on, providing unified services delivery, cloud management. And so we have a fair amount of experience with this. And what we hope to do over the next hour is to share with you some of those lessons learned, best practices, what we're seeing in terms of talking with various types of IT organizations in different industries and different geographies. So, you know, what's kind of driving a lot of the discussion around cloud governance these days, a lot of times the conversation starts with this. You know, an IT organization, CIO, whatever, will come to us and say, man, we've got all kinds of cloud services, software as a service that are being adopted by our various business units. We've got an issue in that, you know, we, the IT organization, are responsible for ensuring, you know, that there's no risk or minimizing risk and compliance risk, you know, data risk. For our organization, and we've done some recent surveys and have found out that, you know, a large portion of our internal employees are using, you know, applications such as Dropbox, Box, etc., that we didn't even know about, you know, until we did that survey. And so, you know, what's happening is that's kind of getting the conversation started in terms more from a risk and compliance standpoint. How do we, you know, get our arms around this? Not in a manner where we, the IT organization, are perceived as trying to stamp out innovation from the various LOBs, but more of a way of just protecting the, you know, the corporation in terms of making sure that there isn't any unnecessary data leakage, whatever the case may be. Now, if you go and if you talk to these different LOB organizations about why are they, you know, going out and adopting these various application services, but in some cases, it's, well, it's a capability that we don't have internally and probably never will have internally. Things like web conferencing, things like that, you know, are classic examples of cloud services where, you know, they perform something, a job that there just is no on-premise equivalent. But in a lot of cases, they're using file sharing, things like that, where, you know, there may be an internal equivalent to it, whether it's SharePoint or something like that, but the workers are saying, you know, it's, we've tried going to IT and it just takes too long and a lot of back and forth and a lot of negotiation, whereas you're just able to pull out a credit card and go sign up for these accounts and be productive, you know, within a few minutes. So that's kind of the rationale as to why these LOB, you know, workers are doing this adoption. Now, if you delve into it, and what's interesting is if you delve into it and you ask these employees, are you aware of what your company's policies are around, you know, using third-party software service cloud services? And in most cases these days, at least, they'll say, we're not aware of what the policies are. We just kind of, you know, sort of, you know, what we do is instead of asking for permission, we beg for forgiveness if, you know, if something is discovered. But in the meantime, we're just trying to do our jobs, we're trying to do it productively, and ultimately that's good for the organization. So what's, you know, clearly becoming evident to, you know, people in different industries, whether they're coming at this from the finance side, the IT side, the LOB side, is that there is a need for organizations to be able to get a handle on how can we enable our different employees to innovate, right, to discover new application services and to incorporate those into how they do their jobs so that they can be more productive. But how do we do that in a way where we're not putting the organization at risk? And so that's kind of the key mandate for trying to understand cloud governance. How do we implement cloud governance? Now, that raises the question, what is cloud governance? Because if you ask 15 different people, you get 15 different answers invariably. And a lot of times, and this maybe goes back a couple years, go to these conferences and CIOs might be questioned about, hey, what's your policy around software as a service and things like that. And I actually heard CIOs saying things like, oh, well, our policy is that we don't let data outside of our firewall, right? Well, there's no regulation out there that I'm aware of that says, corporations should not let their data outside of their firewall, right? If you look at Sarbanes-Oxley, it does not say that. It says you should have an accountable record of where your data is going and who has access to it, but it says nothing about it should be inside your firewall. Now, if you get into some of the EU, privacy legislation, yeah, there are certain criteria in there, like, and it varies on a per country basis, but it might be, oh, you shouldn't let the data outside of the EU, zone, or if it's Germany, it's got to stay within the German boundaries, things like that. But there's nothing out there that says don't let it outside of the corporation. So, your classic kind of bury your head in the sand and say, no, you shouldn't do that is not a tenable solution. So this is not cloud governance. So if you talk to folks like Gartner, and I'm sure all of you or most of you probably have subscriptions with Gartner, or you talk to their analysts, or you talk to IDC analysts, the Forrester analysts, you'll increasingly hear them talking about, hey, one of the biggest impacts of cloud computing is not so much the technology, it's really the business model that it imparts on organizations. And so if you take that in the context of the IT organization, what these analysts are saying is that IT organizations need to modify their business operations plan to work with cloud computing as opposed to working against it. And so, for example, one of the things that Gartner and Forrester talk about is the notion of a cloud service broker. And what they're saying is that IT organizations, are still responsible for rolling out new services, even building new applications that are proprietary to the organization, that are true competitive differentiators. But increasingly for, the horizontal applications, things like email, certainly we've seen this with CRM, with Salesforce, and document sharing with Box and Dropbox. Increasingly, the IT organization needs to be a broker. They need to be essentially in the loop of delivering those value-added services, whether it's from their own data center or whether it's from third-party providers. And by doing that, that means that the IT organization goes back to its original charter of being the primary technology provider to the organizations. Now, the ultimate technology solution may come from a third party, but the LOB, rather than having to go out on their own, try to figure out, okay, what do we use for file sharing, they can go to the IT organization. The IT organization can say, oh, yeah, we've got 3 other groups that are using Box. We've vetted it from a security compliance standpoint. We've got a enterprise-wide site license with Box now. And so, yeah, Mr. LOB customer, you don't have to go out and sign up for Box on your own. We can, fit your need under our existing, existing relationship with that vendor, or with Salesforce, or with Amazon, whoever the case may be. And so, and then for internally developed services, increasingly, IT organizations are wanting to become more flexible, more agile, right? So how do we speed up the pace of innovation within our own organization? And again, they are looking to cloud computing, and they are already incorporating cloud computing in terms of how they can develop services more quickly and roll them out to their end user customers more quickly as well. So let's go back to that original question, what is cloud governance? cloud governance is really a framework for the whole decision-making process, identifying the criteria and policies around, how do we plan for, how do we acquire, how do we operate, how do we manage private and public cloud services, whether it's infrastructure as a service, software as a service, or any other, type of solution as a service. And so cloud governance encompasses people, process, and technology, right? So people, who are the different roles within the organization, processes, what are the different ways that we're going to vet out new cloud solutions, to onboard them, to make them available. And technology is more around how do we incorporate this into our existing IT infrastructure. So good cloud governance policies will help an organization optimize their operations so you can do things more efficiently, become more agile, become more flexible. It'll help them optimize risk and compliance, so enabling their users to innovate at a grassroots level and then incorporate that into the mainstream as it's vetted out individually, but doing it in a manner where they can do it more securely, working with cloud services. And from a financial standpoint, doing it in a manner where there aren't any big surprises in terms of, oh my gosh, look at this Amazon Web Services bill. How the heck did we, how did the heck did this get jacked up to such a huge amount? So being able to monitor the usage as it's happening and to compare it against budgets and have controls in there so that you don't have these, month-end surprises that we often hear about in the news. So cloud governance is rather than being, a bunch of mandates, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that, really you need to kind of flip it around and say it's a way of enabling, what's often referred to as real-time IT by establishing an operating model that improves the speed, agility, and cost effectiveness of how cloud computing is incorporated within the organization. And it allows cloud adoption to happen without friction. So no longer, if you have a good cloud governance policy, if you've got, a worker in the marketing group who is trying to do some kind of collaboration and, they're sort of one of the first ones to discover Box and start implementing it, that IT, rather than getting in the way of that innovation, they're helping it move along, and they're helping it move along in a manner that is cost-effective, that is secure, and that minimizes the risk to the corporation. And so that's what we're saying here is mitigating the risk while achieving the benefits of cloud computing. And then finally, from a financial standpoint, it's all about optimizing cloud usage, spend management. So we all have budgets. Periodically, we're all, as department heads, you're all negotiating budgets with the finance department, with your own management. You're expected to live within those budgets. I mean, cloud computing is great in terms of it's a pay-as-you-go type of model, but sometimes that can create some surprises. It's easy to get into. You can rack up charges pretty quickly if you're not keeping tabs on who has access, how many licenses have you issued, what's the current spend rate, is that going to fall within your budget, et cetera. So let's look at the overall, cloud stack, and generally these days it's a hybrid cloud stack. And what I mean by that is that it incorporates private cloud resources. So this might be your, a VMware farm that you have in your data center. Maybe you've got some OpenStack, instances running that you're doing some net new development on. But you're also probably very likely incorporating public cloud providers. At the infrastructure level, this might be Amazon. It could be, platform as a service types of providers, Microsoft Azure and others. But also, a lot of software as a service providers, Box, Salesforce, WebEx, et cetera. So, identifying kind of what is the entire portfolio from soup to nuts of all the different cloud technologies, internal, external, that we are incorporating at different levels in the value stack within the organization. And then the next thing is, okay, who are the primary users, right? And what are their roles? So generally for application services, it's going to be more of your business users. For application development tools, you're going to have developers. You're going to have the operations folks, the data center folks that are working with things more at an infrastructure level. But then within each of these groups, you're also going to have different sub-organizations. So if you take the business users as an example, you're going to have sales groups, you're going to have marketing groups, you're going to have finance groups, you're going to have product development groups, et cetera. And so each of the needs of each of those groups are going to be different in terms of the types of application or cloud services that they're going to need to be consuming and that they should be presented with when they visit a service catalog, a self-service catalog. So for example, you may want to have a governance policy that says, okay, individuals, employees who are in the sales group should automatically be provisioned to your web-based CRM solution, whether it's Salesforce or something else. Whereas developers should have access to Microsoft Azure, right? Whereas the operations guy should be able to go in and manage the, the VMware instances, things like that. Then you're going to want to have the access controls in place. So how do I actually enforce these authorization policies? And so this is where, generally you'll want to tie into things like your enterprise directory. So, your enterprise directory will have generally will have all of your employees. It will define the different organizational units that they're in. And so that becomes a good, record in terms of how do I apply, what authorization policies should apply to each of those groups and each of those members within those groups. Then you have the auditing side of things, which is, okay, that's fine and good. I've got my authorization policies in place. I have good, strong access controls. Now I want to show a verifiable record that I know where my data is going. I know whom within my organization has access to that data across all of these different functions. And so this becomes important for, internal security reviews. It becomes important for Sarbanes-Oxley audits, HIPAA audits, whatever the case may be. It's also important, the auditing ability is also important in terms of being more effective at license management. So, again, going back to the Salesforce example, oftentimes companies will do a bulk purchase of licenses for Salesforce or other applications, right? So, maybe it's a company that has a large sales force, they purchase 100 seat licenses for Salesforce.com, and, the new employee joins, you're running up to around 99, now 100, seats that have been provisioned. And so the internal question becomes, okay, do we need to do another purchase? Do we need to, pick up another 20 seats or whatever the case may be? Or, can we audit the actual license usage and see if there are some unused licenses? So you can run reports. You want to be able to run reports, and undoubtedly you'll find instances where, gosh, I've issued 99 seats of this particular SaaS application, but really there are 12 of them where the user hasn't even logged in over the last 3 months. Okay, great. Maybe I'll talk to their managers, see if we can reallocate the seat licenses somewhere else. So that's where, having kind of a unified view of all of the provisioning activity, all of the login activity, all of the lifecycle activity is helpful not only from a risk and compliance standpoint, but also from a spend management, license management standpoint as well. Budget versus spend. Okay, so if you keep track of who's been provisioned to what the actual usage is, for software as a service, it's pretty easy. Generally, it's a subscription price. But if it's Amazon Web Services or other types of metered usage types of services, it's not that straightforward. So you've got to have real-time views, generally done through the APIs, into these services to be able to track from a single dashboard, okay, here's what my current spend rate is for, if I'm a departmental manager for my department for Amazon, here's my, cost allocation for the internal VMware, here's my cost for, other services. Or if you're, the CFO or somebody working on behalf of the CFO, you may want to do a roll-up across all of the departments, across all of the organization. And then it's a matter of, okay, how do I actually allocate these costs, from an accounting transaction standpoint, to my users? So you want to be able to run the showback reports, and once you have those showback reports in terms of where you can break down, okay, this department They get allocated this much cost for this cloud service, for that cloud service, for this internal cloud service. You want the ability to be able to export that information into your accounting system so you can actually do a chargeback type of accounting transaction. But at a minimum, at least be able to run showback reports so that so that you can review what the cost allocation is on the departmental basis. Furthermore, another thing you want to be able to do here is consolidate your relationships with each of these vendors. So going back to the Box example, the classic rollout of Box within large corporations is somebody in the marketing department will sign up for it, and they'll get an account with Box. And then somebody in another department who doesn't know about the other guy in the marketing department will sign up and get his or her own account, licensed with Box. And so that's not a very efficient way of scaling up, from a vendor licensing standpoint. So again, you want to have the processes in place so as you have these different areas of innovation from the user level that rolls up into the IT department so that they can start consolidating all those different contracts into a single enterprise site-wide contract, not only to negotiate a better rate with that vendor, but also to hold them accountable in terms of SLAs and things like that. And so part of the job of IT organizations is not only doing that roll-up, but also providing the means of communicating to other departments that come to them and say, hey, we need a document collaboration solution. We're thinking of signing up to Dropbox. Well, listen, Mr. LB customer, you don't need to do that. We've got Box. We've got these 3 other user groups that are using it. I think you'll find that meets your needs. Try it out. Make sure. Oh, yeah, it works great. Okay, so that way you kind of, instead of having, 5 different suppliers for the same capability, you can start narrowing it down to just a handful of suppliers. And again, that makes things easier from a risk and compliance management and license management and auditing standpoint as well. So a little bit about what we provide from a solution standpoint, and then I'll turn it over to Bob so you can actually show you under the covers, some of these capabilities. But we provide a platform that provides a single point of management across the entire life cycle for different types of cloud services, whether it's software as a service, infrastructure as a service, whether these are private cloud services that you're running out of your own data center, that you're hosting out of your own, out of a hosting provider, or that you're sourcing from a third-party, cloud provider. You can have a single point of managing, cataloging, delivering, creating policies around who should have access to each of these different services, enable a single point of sign-on for your users so that they don't have to remember, 25 different passwords for 25 different services, but instead just, one single password that you can then, or you can authenticate them against your, against your enterprise directory. That's a great convenience to end users, but it's also a key element that allows you to track actual usage, to be able to show audits in terms of whom within the organization is accessing different cloud services. It provides a single point of user and service administration. This can be done through our platform. It can be done through your own Active Directory or other LDAP-enabled directory. A single point of running reports. So, okay, a couple different use cases, being able to run a license management report, being able to run a report that shows who's actually using the services, being able to show reports in terms of what the actual usage is. We have a billing engine in there where we consolidate the different billing parameters, whether it's subscription-based pricing, whether it's metered usage type pricing. And we provide the ability to tie in with your existing help desk support system. So, your IT, your traditional IT responsibility of providing support for your users is not just limited to internal services. It's also applicable to services that are being brokered through the platform. So that's kind of the core elements of the platform. We tie in, we have adapters, we have APIs, we have and we've really worked hard on simplifying the whole process of how you onboard applications to this platform. Because what you're going to find is that your your service catalog portfolio is going to be very dynamic. It's going to change over time as users discover new services, as you roll out new services. Now, the other key thing, if you look on the left-hand side, is that what our platform does is we also tie in with your own existing IT assets. So your directory, I've talked about that a few times. Your own accounting system, if you want to have an export of a usage report that goes into your accounting system so that you can actually do a chargeback transaction, to allocate costs to different departments. Tying in with, various portals, DevOps capabilities, etc. So that's our platform. I've talked about the top half of that, which is the services delivery side. That's applicable for externally sourced services as well as for internally provided services. We also have a services management layer that is based on OpenStack that ties into a lot of different IaaS providers, Azure, Amazon, OpenStack, CloudStack, etc. And with this, it allows you to also, support the operations and DevOps types of needs in terms of being able to build up new application stacks, new application solutions for your internal end users, whether you're building it up on your own VMware environment, your own OpenStack environment, or whether you're building on Azure or Amazon Web Services. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob here and let him walk you through a quick demo.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yep.
And so what I'd like to do is start off with talking about catalog management and how that, that's where users are going to be able to consume their services, be they software as a service or infrastructure as a service. It's where you're going to be controlling and publishing out to the user communities what services are available to them for their sorts of needs. And, with different user communities are going to have different needs. Engineering is going to need certain things, maybe some file sharing sites and other tools, whereas sales would use Salesforce. And you're not going to see engineers using Salesforce necessarily. In some cases you might, but generally you won't. So you want to have different sets of catalogs, or at least different service offerings provided to the different user groups. And being able to segment that based on their function or their department is a good way to do that. That's something that that platform provides. So if we look here, this user is logged in as an IT admin, basically, and has access to all the functions in the platform with role-based access control. But they also have access to all the services that are currently offered out to the whole community. So you see here is about a dozen services, each of these squares is a service, and you'll see a mixture of software as a service like Everywhere, as well as infrastructure as a service. You'll see this Azure Stack, you'll see this SharePoint as software as a service, then you have WordPress or Postgres as different stacks for infrastructure as a service. So, in one spot, you see all of that, and if you had some platform as a service, that could be in here as well, and really any other services. If IT is offering up their own internal service, that could be in here as well. So, as an IT user, I see these 12 services, whereas if I switch over to another user in the same company, and I'll just switch to a different browser, okay? This is more of a finance user, and finance was maybe just brought into the platform, and currently they only have these 2 services available to them. But they need something else. They need a UC sort of service. And so as an admin, I can go back, and using the Manage Catalog functionality, I can go and add different services to the finance catalog. So you see under finance, there are the 2 apps here on the right. I'll go ahead and click View Details. And I'll be able to come in and pick what additional apps to provide out to the finance group. So you see there's a list on the left here of things that I can offer up. Let's go ahead and offer Everywhere. This is the UCC solution that I want to offer. Let's go ahead and add that and finish. So as you see here, I'm illustrating the ability to go and customize catalogs. I switch back to the finance user and refresh the page. You see that they now have the ability to go and order Averware. Okay? So maybe with Averware, I'll now, hey, this is something I want. I'm going to go buy it as a finance user. Look at some more details. There could be rich information in here. It's HTML based, so there could be graphics and links to other documents, videos, etc. Or I could just go and purchase it. And here we see the purchasing screen and how much it's going to cost. In this case, it's only a single chargeback fee. Looks like sometimes you can have separate fees for monthly recurring fees and setup fees, etc. But this one has just one fee. Now, in terms of spend management and thinking about budgeting and how to manage that, allowing the users to pick the budget they want to use. Or maybe you assign them budgets, but basically this user here, if I just do a lookup to see what budgets are available to me, in this case we sort of have a free flow of budgets so the users can pick whatever they want. Let's go ahead and pick this miscellaneous budget here. Click OK. So this Averware license will be debited against that budget. And as I click Proceed here, it's now going to go and check to see if there's enough budget. And lo and behold, look, I'm actually over budget. Now, we've configured this here is to just give a warning and advise the user, hey, you're over the budget. Let's go ahead and click OK. And yes, I do want to, as a user, I want to go and still purchase this. I understand we're over the budget. Go ahead and click OK. So we're really implementing this right now as an advisory notification. So after that, I've gone and...
It could be different, right?
It could
block you. It could,
Correct. So we can adjust that, change the workflow to be more policy control driven, so that you're either prevented from doing it, or you can still make the request, but it goes through a different workflow for approvals. In this case, we're just providing an advisor role, and an admin will get an email saying that, hey, there's a new request for a new service. And actually, if I come into this user here as the admin user, make sure I'm on the right screen. I'll come into Manage Requests. I would have received an email and been advised to come into the screen and look at this approval pending item. Go ahead and look at it. And here we'll be able to see different things about the request, who requested it and when, what is it basically and how much does it cost. Say, okay, yeah, this looks fine. It's against the budget you're supposed to use, okay. Approve. This seems like an appropriate use for this user. Oh, look, I now as the admin can see that they're over budget as well. So at this point I could say, okay, yeah, I want to go and maybe approve it, or I could go and deny it and send in a little message back by the system to deny the use of the service. But in this case, we go ahead and approve it out to the user, and they're able to then get access to it. So
you're showing demos are never interesting when everything's automated. So you're showing kind of like, in this case, it's a manual approval type policy that has been put in place here for the service request, right? Is that because it exceeded the budget threshold, so therefore it became a manual approval? Right, or it could have been automated.
You could certainly do that. You could certainly do that, but really all I've set up here is just every request has to get approved.
Yeah.
And then, we have the budgeting functionality to be able to advise both the orderer and the approver of the budget status for what's approved. So they have additional information at their fingertips in order to make the right decisions. That's one of the advantages of a unified platform. When you're ordering and budgeting and having it all tied together nicely, you get some additional value there.
Yeah.
Right? And so if I come over and look, if I go log in back into as the finance guy, I'll go to my dashboard. And I can see now I have Averware available as a service, as well as some of the others that I had before. But really, what I need to do as the admin, not only should I approve the request, but I also need to assign a subscription to that user. So we support both models where it's a complete self-service method, or we can go and actually allow admins to do things on behalf of users. And so in this case, we'll come in and look at the adverware, and let's go and manually sign it out to the users now. I see that I have 6. I have 1 in use. Let's go to sign it out to users. In particular, I'll just go. We could bulk assign if we were bringing in a whole bunch of new users, and I want to do that, but I'll just assign. I'll go just assign to Jim here. So I'll click assign to few. I'll pick, oops, I guess I made a mistake of assigning it to both Jims. I'll go ahead and let me pick the first one. Hopefully that's the right one. I'll go ahead and assign him as a normal role for that service. And now if I come back in here and refresh this dashboard, I should be able to see. Oh, I must have done the wrong Jim. Let me try that one more time. Sign it out to the other Jim. And now we see I have this launch button enabled next to Everywhere. So I've been assigned the license. I can go ahead and launch it and single sign on into the service. Okay. So the single sign on is when you're looking at governance and helping to reduce your risk. Instead of having users writing up hundreds of passwords down on pieces of paper, or it's easy to forget. So sometimes you use simple passwords. Here, we're really just requiring users only to have one password to get into the Jamcracker system. Now, we also integrate with Active Directory, and we can be set up in modes where you don't even have to log into Jamcracker. You just log into Active Directory, and then you're authorized, I think something like ADFS, to access the Jamcracker platform. And then from here, you can single sign on into any of the services. Further, if you just want to bookmark those services, you'll be able to single sign on into them. And through the chaining mechanisms involved with the authorization, Jamcracker will be advised that you have logged into that service, enabling some of the reports we have around usage, so you can get an idea of, yes, all these people have been subscribed to these services, but are they actually using them? At least, are they even signing in? So those are some of the reports that are available, and I can show you a little bit later. So from the software as a service perspective, really that's what we're talking about. It's subscribing to something, assigning it out to somebody else if you're an admin doing it on behalf of people, and then single signing on into that service to be able to use that. We also have, in our platform, obviously, we have the software as a service and infrastructure as a service that I mentioned. And so, instead of just thinking about spinning up a VM, we really talk about applications, application stacks. So it's not just spinning up a VM and then having to load all the stuff on it. We could certainly do that. But really, the catalog you want to make available to users are stacks that have been designed by someone that has, maybe hardened the system appropriately or defined what clouds it should be run on. So for instance, here's one where we have Postgres defined how to run on AWS. It's probably configured differently internally than a Postgres stack on a private cloud. All right? So if I were to go and maybe pick this private cloud here, pick this one, go ahead and launch it. So it'll come up into the palette where we can see, we'll shortly see a virtual machine here on the left-hand side. I can come out here and give it a name, say TD, and I'll run this on OpenStack 7. I'll need to assign a budget code as well for this also, right? In this case, I don't know, maybe I'll pick the VM one since I didn't set up an OpenStack one, but maybe I'll run this one on VMware. So I'll go ahead and do that. I have that budget code. And then I can go ahead and pick which cloud I want to run it on. Now this can actually be something you do on a per VM basis. These stacks can be multiple VMs. So if you had a 3-tier web stack, for instance, you want to keep the databases only running on private clouds, but maybe the application server is also there, but then allow the Apache front end or whatever other web server to be running in the private cloud. You can do that, and then the users, when they're trying to run them, will then be able to pick whichever the designer has allowed them to pick. In this case, this is only defined for running on a private infrastructure, such as VMware. We go ahead and pick what region. If I have multiple regions, I could pick from that, or if different OS versions, and then what size, it's a 512 meg, 1 gig, 2 gig sort of instance, etc. Okay. After doing all that, I can go ahead and launch it. And now I'm actually going to go and, like the software as a service, it's going to generate a request for that admin to come back in and go and approve that request. I'll go ahead and do that.
So just to recap, so far you've gone in, there's an off-the-shelf template that you said, yeah, I want to run this on VMware. And so somebody prior to you would have defined that template, and they would have said, okay, this thing can run on these following instances, right? So in other words, all the parameters on the right were defined by somebody prior to you?
That's exactly right. And after I've gone and approved the request here, while you were saying that, you'll see here that this stack is initializing and it's running through its orchestration plan of creating ports and launching the instance. But just to get back to that point you had mentioned, here's little different interfaces where the designers would actually come in and define the stack templates. And you'll see this looks similar to that screen I just showed you, but on the left-hand side, you'll see a set of resources that could be made available. So say in these application resources, maybe I'll drag out an Apache and a JBoss and for a database, so I don't know, MySQL. It's just the resource that I have available here. So I now have 3 different virtual machines. And for each virtual machine, I can then pick which cloud I want to run it on. Apache, like I said, best practice, let them run it anywhere. But the database, maybe, I do want to just keep that on the VMware deployment that we have in the OpenStack.
Okay.
That is an option. On a per VM basis, you can do that. Now, obviously, when you do that, you have some networking considerations, and some of that needs to be optional as well. So you have to define, what are the networking requirements between these 2 machines. Actually, the most interesting one between the private and public. So I can go in here and define what is the name, web app, I'll call it, and I'll give it, TCP ports 500 to 510, could be another protocol, could be also UDP, etc. Define different protocols, and I'm basically defining what type needs to be opened up between these 2 instances wherever they exist. Within Amazon, there could be, they still need those security groups defined. Same thing within OpenStack. But if you're going between Amazon and VMware, you're going to need to be talking to a firewall somewhere, making sure that that port is going to be enabled to whatever public IP addresses that Apache is presenting to them. So this is what the application stack designer goes through. They pick the resources that are available. These are like base VMs. And then if they also have maybe a vanilla VM, right? They could have, I don't know, just, generic Linux stack, and then they want to go and use something like Chef to go and customize that. Or maybe I'll customize this Apache server with the Chef cookbook as an instance. Come in, pick which kind of Chef it is, specify the parameters that are going to allow me to point at a cookbook, everything, the different organizations, and then the key files get in there. And then ultimately I can define some cookbooks so that at runtime this machine will be customized based on the latest cookbooks that are available out on my server. So this is that whole application stack process. You define this, we save the template, and we go through a publishing process. We give it a name, we give catalog information, we define important stuff that the user needs to understand when they're trying to use this, so that it would then appear in our catalogs, like these other services, for the type of application that we want. And then again, with the catalog control, I can make it available to only certain departments. Okay. So, talk about the ability to let different departments, groups of users in that regard, have access to different catalog items. But then there's also the ability to define what are the functions in the menu bar and the functions of the Jamcracker platform that they're able to access. As an admin, I have access to all these. As you see here for this finance user, he has less of a thing. He doesn't have the infrastructure as a service console, for instance. And that is all controlled by our role-based access control. Okay. So if I dip down here, see roles and privileges. And here is where we can define, you see there are multiple roles defined. You can always define additional ones, and then edit the ones that are available to you here. So maybe I can look at the finance role and take a look at what functionality is available to finance users. So for the finance role, here are the permissions that are available, and you can see that some of them are selected, some of them not. And again, consistently, you see infrastructure as a service is not available. If I were to enable these, then that user would see the infrastructure as a service menu item, looking at the monitoring, etc. So you're able to give very granular permissions to users in terms of what they can do in the platform. Are they responsible for approving orders? Are they They need to see reports on usage and that sort of thing. So they need infrastructure as a service. With the flexible role-based access control, we were able to define that exactly to our needs. Now, in a large enterprise, one thing you don't want to end up doing is having to manage users on multiple systems all the time, right? I don't want to, if a user leaves the company, I now have to go through 10 different systems to delete them. And ideally, you don't do that.
Once you figure out what 10 systems they're running.
Once you figure out systems, exactly, right? So, but if it's all coming through the Jamcracker platform, then you're able to first see all the services that they have. But then, if you're running Active Directory, your IT people are used to creating users and assigning their policies and privileges in there. And so, with the Jamcracker platform, you can go and integrate this with an Active Directory server. And actually, this store is integrated with Active Directory, so that the users themselves are defined there like they normally are for any other users in the enterprise. As well as their roles and departments are defined in there, meaning the name of the role and the name of the department. So that IT and the people who are responsible for managing users when they're coming and going and changing jobs, they're able to do it in the place they're familiar doing it with. Now, within the Jamcracker platform, because there are specific functionalities within Jamcracker that need specialized knowledge, we would have an enterprise admin and Jamcracker go and use this role-based access control to define the granular privileges for those roles and to define the granular catalog items for those departments. Okay? Now, along the way, I showed you, the budgeting functionality, how you can pick a budget, you get notified if you're coming over budget, but all that's well and good, but unless you have an ability to actually see what those budgets are looking like, you want to assign some budgets, define what they are, you want to define when they're valid for, what's the name of them, what amount is in them, and what amount you want to maybe alert on. And all that functionality is available on the platform. We have some sample templates that allow you to define that. And then after doing that, and users are starting to consume the service, you can then come and click the showback report to get an idea of what services have been consumed. Okay? So if I look down here in October, you can see for these different budget codes with these certain descriptions, what has been budgeted and what has been used. And like I demonstrated earlier, I'd gone over budget for this miscellaneous element when I went to go buy that everywhere from miscellaneous. Okay? So this is giving you that ability to see where and what budgets are being utilized. And this can be exported to an external system. Maybe you have, whatever financial system. This can be exported on a regular basis to do management through that, and maybe, forcing people to start reviewing budgets or to issue policy changes, etc. But we have it all within the platform because the platform knows what the item costs. We'll be able to deduct against the budget here and then report that back into the financial control system that they have out there. Okay. Now, we talk about some policies, right? We talked about having just by showing certain things in the catalog, you have policies. And with role-based access control, those give you some policies. But then there's also, around virtual machines, you want to have some policy management there as well. Maybe dev test users, for instance, you don't want them running machines 24/7, or there are certain groups that need only for certain times of day. So we come in here and look at policies functionality, specifically called policies functionality, that can have a sort of time of day function where, let me look at a different store actually. I forgot this store doesn't have any policies for a moment. Take this store here, take a look at the policies. So this is a different company. As you can see, I have multiple stores that is all running on the same instance. You can do this. You have different subsidiaries in different stores, et cetera. So you can have different branding and all that. But here we see, as an example, some policies, maybe some time-bound policies where, we want to have servers stop on certain days and start them at certain times. So maybe you start them at 6 a.m. and stop them at 8 p.m. So, in Amazon, you're going to save a little bit of money if you're not running them 24/7.
So it's interesting. So what you just showed here, so for example, governance requirements may be different in different geographies, right? So you showed maybe the first store where it was a business unit that doesn't require these kinds of policies, right? Whereas you've got this other store that maybe is for a different geography or a different business unit where they do have requirements for this policy. So in other words, you can delegate policy definitions down to different operating units in addition to kind of setting guidelines at the top.
Sure. The multi-tenant architecture that we have gives you a lot of flexibility. Yeah. Having each store, as we call it, app store or portal, might be a better term for the enterprise. You could have different business units using different portals, and they have complete control over it for their business unit. They don't have to be, handcuffed by some other business unit that has some hard requirement. That doesn't have to apply to everyone. And so here, these are some examples. We also have monitoring-based policies. So let's take an example. Say you have an application that you're a retail establishment, and you're starting to get towards the holidays, and you want to scale up as usage goes up. You can manually do that, manually monitor it, manually resize that through the functionality of the platform, or you can set up a policy that takes a look at the RAM usage or the CPU usage or any other parameters, and then be able to go and take action based on that. So using a monitoring engine that we have in the platform that can monitor any of the instances and applications that were deployed, we can then go and take action on that, and using our APIs for elasticity, you could scale up the RAM or scale up the CPUs. Or even if the application is defined accordingly, you could scale out and add additional virtual machines. Maybe that's how this application should be scaling as opposed to adding more RAM. So with these policies here, we're able to achieve some really great functionality in terms of managing utilization to demand, and also managing costs when it comes to time-based policies to shut down servers on the weekends for dev tests, etc. Okay. And I think that's mostly what I wanted to show. Ultimately, reporting is important, and reporting cuts across things. It's not just spend reporting, it's not just access reporting, but it is important to get an idea of what are the orders. What is the order history here? What has happened for the orders? I think I actually have one open up here. Yeah, let's pick one that's already open. Here's an example of an order history. So you can see the different applications and services that were requested, when they're actually activated, fulfilled, their current status, and any costs associated with them. So here's a very powerful report that could be used for any number of things, just to understand what's being used and then where the spend is going, et cetera. Beyond just budgets, which can look at it as a different view, a different cross-section, here we're actually looking at the actual applications. You have other reports as well for things like logins, et cetera. So, that functionality here at the store level, and then also up through the tiers to that back-end interface, we also have reporting here that gives you really rich information about various aspects of what's going on in the platform. So maybe it's looking at the different services, logins, users, you're doing reporting users, any of the orders or requests that got out there, et cetera. We have these rich out-of-the-box reports. We also have the ability to provide custom reports. If you want to have your own analytics platform go and pull things from data marts, there's some rich data marts available giving you access to any of the data from the platform that you need, such as order information, term orders, et cetera. And for any big reports that could maybe generate thousands of rows, we have a nice capability to manage that and not have to kill the system while it's printing out the report, but actually run it as a batch job, and an email will be sent out, making it available as an offline report. So we have some intelligence around that, keeping the performance behaving for you. I think that's it. With the time I have, we're running low on time here. Those are the main functionalities I think that are really relevant towards governance.
All right, great. Thank you, Bob. Tony, if you could hand it back over to me, and I'll wrap things up here. All right. So thank you, Bob. So just to kind of bubble this up, we've been talking about how governance has different views depending on what you're trying to achieve and who you are within the organization. We talked about three major ones, which are, how do I reduce risk? And so this would be the risk and compliance guy. This would be the CISO, who would be interested in these kinds of things. So they want to make sure that you're adhering to different regulatory requirements, different compliance standards. And some of the, enabling features that we talked about are things like enabling user single sign-on, roles-based access control, policy enforcement, et cetera. And so what this does is it provides a auditable record of who's got access to what, where your data is going. And you can also set policies, as Bob showed, so that, okay, finance people should be able to view these applications. Developers should be able to do all the whiz-bangy stuff that Bob is showing with the drag and drop, but, we don't want marketing guys doing that, right? So being able to set rich policies for different types of users, for different types of user groups, for different types of business units across your organization is a very powerful thing. And having one place to do that for all of the different cloud services that you're consuming, whether they're internal or external. From a financial standpoint, this would be the CFO or the finance and accounting team, is being able to get a better handle on how the money is being spent on different cloud services. So being able to track, spending across dozens, hundreds of different cloud services across, dozens, hundreds of different departments. Being able to track spend across multiple business units, geographies, currencies. Being able to view things in real time, so you're not having to wait for that, month at the end of the month invoice from, an IaaS provider. You can track things in real time. Being able to get a holistic view of, what has been my current and past usage trends, and based on that, how can I put together a better budget, work with departments to put together a better budget in terms of what their cloud spend is going to be going forward. And then just, automating all this stuff across all these different cloud services by having a single point where you can have and experience financial governance by automating the billing, the metering, settlement, and chargebacks. And then finally, from an operations management standpoint, and Bob showed a few things here in terms of, designing the templates, so that developers don't have to go out and build, virtual machines from scratch, go out on their own, to do that. The operations folks can provide a menu of different compute instances, so the developers can focus on what they should be spending their time on, which is developing new services, and not having the overhead of having to spin up, do all the manual work in terms of defining the virtual machines and running the financial risk that they're going to spin up something that is way above, from a budgetary standpoint, what they really need. So, again, the key theme with operations and cloud is really improving the agility, the flexibility, and the time to value for the entire IT operations organization, doing it efficiently. We've got just a minute or so left, so I'm going to quickly cover a couple different examples of organizations we're working with. The first one is a very large multinational automotive parts manufacturer. They develop lots of different auto parts and different brands, the kinds of things you would buy at the local Kragen store, but also that they OEM into new cars manufactured in the U.S., in Asia, and in Europe. And so the key thing that they were wrestling with from a governance standpoint is, again, the shadow IT adoption by different LOBs, really concerned about all the compliance issues across all the different geographies where they're located. And also, one of the other key interests of the CIO was to also, set the groundwork for creating a chargeback capability for cloud usage. So they wanted to go down this path of brokering external services, working with the LOBs to bubble up services that were becoming standard into the central services catalog, make it easy for other organizations to discover them, and being able to set up rules-based access control in terms of having different catalog views for different types of users in different departments and different business units and different geographies, et cetera. And so they're really going down this path of providing a comprehensive lifecycle management across all the different disciplines for all the cloud services being consumed. Another example, I use this because it's a great example of a shared services type of organization. This is very common in government types of organizations where you have sort of a central IT organization that services lots of different units. This is also very common in very large multinational corporations. You know, think of like a GE or something like that, where they have a central IT and then lots of different subsidiary companies, GE Aircraft, et cetera. And so what we're seeing is more and more, a lot of companies, a lot of governments especially, are moving towards a shared services strategy where they've got kind of a single internal service provider, you know, meeting the needs of all the different operating, you know, businesses. In this case, we're talking about CETA. They provide shared services for about 450 different airline companies, air transport customers. So this is kind of a community cloud, if you will. And again, they're delivering, they have lots of data centers. They're delivering their own services from those data centers. They're also acting as a broker for all of the, you know, different cloud services being consumed by all the different airlines from third parties. So again, they're providing the value of centralizing the governance, cloud governance for all of their different member companies. So that's about all we have time for. Just to wrap up, as you're moving down your journey towards, you know, thinking about your own cloud governance strategy, again, you know, please think of us, reach out to us. If you'd like to see a more in-depth demo, you know, we can set that up. If you just want to set up some time to talk about how, you know, this might impact some of the considerations from an organizational standpoint, we've done workshops with organizations in the past to help them with that. So with this,